Welcome to the Purposeful in Life podcast, where our mission is to help individuals and organizations find their purpose so that they may live a life that is fulfilling and inspired in and out of work. Your hosts, Christina Hall and myself, Garrett Willey, are passionate to inspire, teach, mentor, and serve our community. We have 42 years of combined experience as entrepreneurs and in international corporations. Both of us have military backgrounds. Myself, Garrett, as a commissioned officer with over 9 years of service, and Christina as a military spouse of over 15 years. Welcome to Purposeful in Life, where together we go on the journey of discovering a life filled with purpose and intention. Hi guys, welcome back to Purposeful in Life with Garrett Willey and
Christina Hall.
And we have a guest today. Michael wanted to say his name. So
Michael Brulette.
Michael Brulette is our guest today, and we're really pleased to have you on the show. Michael is a counselor and an author of a really interesting book, and I read some of it. Did Christina read any of it?
I did.
Yeah, she's the reader of us. I'm the listener, so that might inform you that it makes sense to put this on Audible or those kind of sources. Have you done that yet? Or are you thinking about doing it?
Nope.
So I think it's a good idea. We actually would like to write a book at some point to talk about what we talk about here.
I'd
So
love to help you.
we would love to get your help.
Awesome.
I've helped a few people write their books. It's really all about your strategy and how to get words a day,
Oh,
and then
interesting.
having an accountability partner.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
So important
That's
for everything,
neutral,
right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and accountability and mentorship with it. So I think both those things are important. And
Let's do it.
let's do it. All right.
Let's do it.
Now we're in the hot seat because I actually said it on the air that we're going to write a book. I've told people that individually because part of what Christina and I are doing with Purposeful in Life is we're trying to help individuals and people find their purpose, so they can live a fulfilling life in and out of work, right? So whether it's like in work or out of work, because a lot of people just float through life and they have no real purpose, and then they end up with kind of like the reason that I asked you to come on the show, people end up with like depression and anxiety and just like no direction in life. And then they wonder why they're feeling all these things or why they're telling themselves these stories that really bring them down. And if they had a purpose that they were working towards that was bigger than themselves, and we talked about that a lot as well, because the purpose isn't just like, oh, it's me, myself, and I. It's service of others, right? And when you're serving other people, then you find fulfillment. And so that's why we're here. But we do like the idea of a book. And our book is obviously going to be about the subject matter, the theme of our podcast, having purpose in life. And something that I think is important and interesting to talk about would be that there's different levels of purpose. There's the purpose that God created you for, that it's both your experience, like nature and nurture. It's like who we are. Every one of us has an individual purpose. And then there's subsets or purposes on top of that that are for phases of our life, right? Like family is an essential part of your life, but it's not why you were created per se, right? That they could be tied together, of course, depending on the individual. And then there's like work and different parts of life that are like sub portions of purpose. So that's the way I was visualizing it. I'm not quite sure how to explain that without being drawing. And I can visualize stuff in my head, but if I draw it, people will be like, oh my gosh, she's in 4th grade. I actually, on Friday, I went with my girlfriend because she volunteers at her church and does divorce care for kids. And so it's like pretty much, I remembered like all the way back when I was in the Army as a mental health specialist in the Army and leading like group therapy for adults, like in inpatient and outpatient facilities. And you're going to be very familiar with this, Michael, because I'm sure you've done a lot of that. But doing that felt like that, like in a mini thing with a whole bunch of little kids, where you're teaching them about feelings and that these feelings are okay. And here's the progression of feelings of what's going on. And I was like, wow, I really, really liked doing that volunteer thing. But anyways, I digressed a lot. So
Just a little.
the reason we have you here, and we'd love to learn more about you and what your purpose is in life, whether it be like main purpose or subsets of that. And I'd love to hear you share about stuff that you're thinking people aren't ready for.
That's a good one.
You're like, oh crap, I shouldn't have said that to Garrett, because now he's like, what is this you were talking about? Because all I could think about before the show, Michael and I were talking, and he said that a lot of the world wouldn't be ready for what he believes his real purpose is in overall in life. And Michael does hypnotherapy, and there's a lot of people that aren't sure about that. I really liked in your book that you talked about the different parts of our mind, the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. And then you highlighted also the spiritual on the side of that too. So, and I think people are just like, well, that's weird if they don't think about those things. And I know that you could tell us better what they are, but the conscious is really obvious because it's like our conversation right now. And I liked how you said in the book, your subconscious is like when you wake up in a dream state. And then sometimes it's like hard to remember the dreams. Other times you're waking up and you're thinking about the dream and you're like, is it real or not? And you're like trying to figure out where you're at, or you're just you're thinking about the dream because you want to remember it and try to pick up. Was there something important, or was I just having some weird fanciful moment from some TV show I watched or something? Because that happens too, right? You put yourself, like for me, like when I watch movies and stuff, I like put myself in there with the character. I'm the guy that like cries during the movie and has that joy when they're joyful and like feels what they're feeling. I don't know why, but I just have always been that way. And so like then when you wake up in a dream, you're thinking about that as well. And then the unconscious you spoke of in your book being like your heartbeat and stuff like that. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about like, I wonder if that's tied to like, you always see the movies or read the books where like the CIA agent can like control his heartbeat and other, physical attributes so they could beat like the lie detector test and stuff. Is that what you're referring to? Like somebody can actually influence their unconscious?
If you're trying to influence it, it's not unconscious.
True.
Then it becomes conscious. So there's certain elements like breathing that cross over to conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. So let me just take a moment, if I might. Did you want to start with anything?
No, go ahead, please.
Just to talk, it's kind of like starting in the middle to have this conversation right here, because nobody knows who I am or what I am or what my background or anything like that.
Let's come back to that for sure, but this is interesting stuff.
We'll definitely do that. When you think about breathing, all of you hold your breath for a moment. Okay, let it out. That was a conscious decision to stop your breathing. Now, as you're just kind of now breathing and not thinking about it, or maybe going in between thinking about it and not thinking about it, but you're still coming in with air and letting air come out, that crosses over into an unconscious process where you're not aware of it. You're not like subtly trying to change it. It's happening, and there's parts of your brain that are telling your lungs to expand and contract. And unconscious, we rarely have any control over. But they also don't really affect our relationships, our moods necessarily. They're things that keep the blood flowing in a certain direction. They're things that keeps the heart pumping, etc. Subconscious gets to be more about the programming. So when's the last time when you drank a cup of coffee, you reached for the cup and you thought, oh, I got to keep it level and steady. Maybe when you got into a new environment, like you're walking across a rocky terrain, you're like, oh, got to watch it again. But if you're just going across the living room, that's a subconscious, because you already programmed all the muscles in your body and your hand, and it's just a habit. But that's subconscious because you're not thinking, oh, keep it level, keep it level.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we had to think through every process that we do all day long? So that's the subconscious part. But the subconscious part's your memories. They're very, very highly affected by that. From the moment we're born, and something before that even, that we start to get these impressions that create cellular structure in our mind. And the cellular structure in our mind, they're little cells that come together into constructs that create a single thought or desire or command for your body. And each one of us is just so unique because there's trillions of possibilities of what those are. And as we get those combinations of cells firing in certain ways, they start to become what's called habits or patterns, the things that we know how to do. Like we learn things like, what color is this?
Black.
What color is that?
Black.
So all three of us would agree with that, right? What color is that?
Well, the light seems like
Yeah.
a purplish pink.
Purple,
here.
pink.
Yeah, so we might have a difference of opinion, but it would be based on our memory and what we were told that color might be. So we start to divest from what's considered true, like the ocean is water, that's true, to what does the ocean mean to you? And you got a complete different answer than you have than I have. And that's based on that cellular structure that we create from the very moment we're born and as we live longer and longer.
Our
divest
experiences.
into-
That's okay. No,
Wow.
we like that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like why we want to make sure that you guys go on to Amazon and buy his book. You were saying that most people read about the first half, and then when they get to the therapy part,
Yeah. It's interesting. Right now, I'm not really pushing this too much.
Okay.
It's designed for clients. I give a free copy to every client that I have in my therapy. I'm a marriage and family therapist,
Okay.
as well as a hypnotherapist. What a lot of people don't understand about hypnosis, and that's getting down into more of my passion. I've studied hypnosis over 40 years. The very first book I ever read that I remember ever reading was Passions of the Mind by Irving Stone. And it's a fictional biography of Sigmund Freud, who was
Okay.
nuts and absolutely crazy and a cocaine user and all that stuff. But he was just crazy. But for me, I was illiterate. I graduated from high school and I couldn't hardly read or spell. Yeah, and it was amazing because I was quote unquote really brilliant as a child when I was just starting out. When I was 5, I could do my multiplications up through 12s.
Wow.
But by about junior high, that was it. I gave up, didn't want to try anymore. And then as I got into high school, I had these different lives where as a student, I was an F student. I wouldn't show up for class. I hated to learn. I just didn't like it. But I was captain of the chess club. And I was literally a track star. 4 events going to state: high jump, long jump, triple jump, and high hurdles. And I would earn first place in events every single track meet, and the rest of the team faltered. I often would make more points in track than they would. From my perspective, that was the life of being an athlete and the life of being into chess and the life of a student. And then I had my home life and friend life and other lives. And that kind of concept is something that I start to talk about in the book, is how from birth to death, we all have a lot of different lives. You guys probably did something different before you did this, right?
lots of different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you do before you did this, if you want to share?
Man, so many different things.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of different
Like,
lives.
I don't even know.
And
yeah.
some of them you're still doing.
And
right?
some of
'Cause
them I'm
you,
still doing, yeah.
You said there's that overlap there.
That's
I,
right.
I do have to say though, like I read that part of the book and I found it so inspiring and it makes sense because I always thought of myself when I went to school, people don't know the real me because in school I was totally different person than at home, or you know, I was a, don't laugh people, competitive table tennis player, and I was a totally different person then.
Yeah,
So
that was a different life.
Yeah, different life. So I totally get that, and I find that so fascinating.
Our different lives are the construct of the collections of different memory cells. And what I do with therapy is so unique, and I really am passionate about trying to present that to people so that they understand that. Using the hypnosis is probably something that makes therapy faster once you understand that if you took that word hypnosis and switched it out for focused concentration,
Yeah, that makes more
you're really getting to the essence of what it is. You're just
Yeah.
trying to focus your mind into a single thought or one or two thoughts. So much comes into us through what's called sensory memory. Most of the research in memory these days is about sensory memory because we've got the long-term memory and the short-term memory and the working memory.
By sensory, you mean
Different
like
things.
the emotional ties to the memory?
Well,
or-
the best thing to show it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Close your eyes. Don't think about a dog. Open your eyes.
That's all I can think about.
Right. So
Which
that-
dog did you think about, though?
Mine.
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying, in my world, as both a school-trained master's in psychology and licensed marriage and family therapist, and then a 8-month-long hypnotherapy training, you can be a hypnotherapist, quote unquote, with a weekend course and no psychology background at all. So it's possible to go to Seattle and sit through a Friday, Saturday, Sunday conference and then apply to the state of Washington and put a shingle out and start charging money for your advice. I know, I see a big open mouth up there. It's like absolutely
Sadie's like,
frightening
no.
how little they know. But for me, I've studied and worked with it 40 years, and in 2008 graduated with my master's in psychology. So I'm really into learning the mechanics of it all and being able to then use the hypnosis as a tool for the therapy to be able to help. You know, what were we doing with the don't think about a dog? Sensory memory says that our body, from the moment we're born, the first thing that has to happen is you have to identify every sensory signal. And you do that because survival. If the bushes rattled and you didn't identify that that was a threat, and then either freeze or run, or if you
Or
didn't-
charge at it.
yeah, or attack, you probably got eaten and you didn't pass on your DNA. But if you did respond and procreated, the next person would be paying attention to their senses again.
Yes.
So at this point, everything we do, when I walk in the door, you look at everything and you say, oh, that's a lamp, that's a light, that's a this, that's a table, that's a that. But you do it just instantly and subconsciously to identify whether there's any threats in the environment for survival, right? So when I say don't think about a dog, you cannot not think about it. You have to identify each word. Now, the one of the, I do this with every first session client. I do that little exercise in order to introduce sensory memory. So the next thing you do is you say, okay, now that you know that's coming, do you like cats at all? Not so much, right? Do you like cats?
little.
A little bit. But what I want you to do is to, when I say don't think about a dog, you can't not do that. But then I want you to shift and think about a cat, okay?
Okay.
You ready? Close your eyes.
Okay.
Don't think about a dog. All right, open your eyes. How'd you do?
It was hard.
You saw the dog first.
Yes,
And
and
then
then
you kept
cat.
trying to see the cat.
Yes.
And did you eventually see a cat?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And?
I was thinking about the cat already, so it made it easier because you set it up. So I was like, okay, cat, Ben, my old cat that I used to have. So I'm like thinking about my
So
cat.
now let's
But the
take
dog
that,
still was sitting back there,
right?
and the
right.
mind going, okay, I'm here.
So that's just an introduction to how that construct of the dog, all the little cells that make us have that memory. By the way, your image of a dog is totally different than your image of a dog, right? That's that
Yeah.
our individuality again. But that's kind of a example of how you can shift from a negative emotion or feeling about yourself or others into a feeling that you want to feel. Once you're able to shift
You
from
still
the
have the
dog to
negative
cat,
feeling
right?
back there, but you try to drown it out with the other feeling.
Yeah, because you
So-
can't not have those cells in your brain that your mind goes to. And then when you take that even further, like, did you ever learn to ride a bicycle?
Yeah.
Do you remember like the first, maybe some first memories of
Yes.
Tell me, what was that like, just first memories of riding a bicycle?
We were out in the woods with my
Okay.
dad and my sister because my mom didn't want to look.
Okay.
It was just too painful for her. And I just wobbly and, trying to balance.
So when's the last time you thought about that?
Well, now, I don't know.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Right? Really long
What
time
about
ago?
teaching Katie to ride a bike? Do you think about you learning when you teach her, or is it?
She's still on training wheels, but yeah,
But
might have come up.
back to your memory, those cells are there forever.
Yeah.
They're just not exercised at getting there. So like the synaptic connections to those memories are kind of withered and real weak. But as soon as you started thinking about it, then it branched off into details about your
yeah.
mom and your wobbly
Yeah.
and then where you were at and the environment. And as you spent more time in there, more cells would wake back up. It would be very accessible to you. So that's like with habits and problems. But it also is true with like your passion or your vision or your goal. So in multi-life therapy, I usually do a single first session to teach people to be able to get into focused concentration, a trance state, and they learn a little a technique of putting a thumb and finger together and saying the word trance, and they're out. they're really focused on how they concentrate. And the other one is giving a place trigger. So that when you put a thumb and finger together, you say the word place. And that's like the other house. So this is the house of your issue, your problem, or whatever. This house is your place house. So you can feel, because you can't remember a feeling without feeling a feeling. This is your feeling, and you're remembering that feeling when you say place. So if you're having depression or anxiety or self-doubt or whatever, and you say place, you're feeling the way you want to feel.
So
And
it
that's
takes
the
you
first
the,
session.
so you help people find a place that they felt the safest and
Yeah.
happiest in.
Yeah, and then they put it as a trigger.
And they
You can be driving down
place.
the road, somebody cuts you off, and you go place, and you're back to feeling good and not even there. The second session we do, which is really into your work, is we create the future self. So you go far enough into the future that you can believe you've achieved your goal. So part of that is like identifying what that is, what's that look like, where you live in, who you're with, do you have kids, how's that? And for some people, that's like 20 years from now. And then we go into the trance state and we experience it. And people feel that. They feel what it's like to have achieved that. And then when they come out of it, the epiphany is always, how'd that feel? And they're like, oh man, that was awesome. If your mind has the capacity to feel that way now, you can feel that way now.
Yeah, you just teach yourself to do it.
That's right. So the more you practice going to that place, that house that's your future self, the more you're going to make decisions to go in that direction and become that person.
Every day and every night, I read the statement of what it's like, what I envision my life to be. You know, like I say, I attract, and I have this whole list of words that I attract, and it was actually Angela's idea. So we just like make sure that we're reading that, and it's really cool because what we're doing is we're placing ourselves in the place or position that we want to be in. So it's really exciting to be able to set yourself on a mindset that's for that, because we're focused on it every morning, every night. Sometimes throughout the day, you just like glance at it and you're like, yeah, that's where I want to live, and that's where I'm living. And you always say it in the present tense. You know, like it could, like one of the line items for her and for me is like individual goals that we have, but we say it in the present tense. This is what we're doing right now. And it's not, but we're telling our subconscious that it is, so we can get ourselves in the mindset for that. So what got you into psychology to begin with? I read something somewhere that you said, like, was it 1978 or something that you started down this road?
Yeah, with that book, Passion of the Mind. So I graduated from high school, unbelievably, with a 1.8 grade point average. I had started my senior year needing to pass one English class to graduate. And at the end of the first semester, I still needed one class to graduate. Flunked all 6 classes. 4 of them were music, 1 of them was PE and an English class, and I flunked 4 music, PE, and an English class. And then the second semester, I was able to finally get that English class so I could graduate. But a year out of high school, working as a supply clerk in an insurance company, and seeing my boss, who'd been there for 13 years, he was making a couple $100s a month more than I was. And that was my life and my future. It was like I needed to start
Kind of like a smack in the
getting
face. You're
educated.
like,
I needed to do something. So I picked up this book at the bookstore and was thumbing through it, and I didn't know most of the words in there. And I said, okay, I'm going to learn it. And I would take a sheet of paper and I'd write down and highlight 10 words I didn't know, starting from page 1. And I didn't get through page 1 without having 10 words. And then I'd go to the dictionary and I'd look up each word, and I'd practice it, and I'd put it on a 3x5 card, and I'd learn it. Then the next day I'd do it again, and I'd do it again. After a couple of weeks, I could go like 10 pages without finding 10 words. And after about 3 months, I could go several pages a long ways in without writing any new words. And it was like, wow, this is exciting. And I just kept doing it. And that book was about Sigmund Freud and psychology and hypnosis and all that, and which I got really fascinated on. Then came the next, probably most dramatic book ever, which was called You Have Been Here Before by Dr. Edith Fiore.
I haven't heard of it.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just
Tell us
leave
more.
that alone because that goes off into the direction that is more narrow focused on appeal for people understanding and what's happening there. And then it just became a passion to study and learn and more books and more books. And I also had a really traumatic early marriage that caused me to just dramatically get into books on relationships and marriages. I remember reading those positive self-help books. At one point, I had 80 positive self books under my belt before I quit counting anymore. Things like The Power of Positive Thinking, all this kind of stuff. So all that went into my brain, and then I started the college classes working towards my psychology bachelor's degree. And then I started my master's degree. In the same couple of months that I started my master's degree, I had a only child. His name is Tony. He was 12 here in Washington State. And don't know, you guys been around Washington State a while, but do you remember the E. coli breakout at Jack in the Box?
No,
Well,
I came in
don't, but I-
'94 is when I came up here. When was that?
It was a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah.
But it was huge, and if you looked it up, you'd see there was like 800 people that were sick and multiple, like 13 or something that died from E. coli. It was a huge, huge thing. Well, my son threw up in 5th grade in the hall in his school, and a teacher saw him throw up in the hall and asked if he'd eaten at Jack in the Box, and he said yes.
Ooh.
So they called an ambulance instead of calling us, and at the time I was in the military, and they took him to Madigan Army Medical Center. And then Mom and I got calls, and we both showed up. And he did not have E. coli.
But the scare was there.
He had cancer in all 4 quadrants of his liver.
Oh
And
my
his liver
goodness.
was failing. And they said if he had gone home that night, he would not have woken up. He would have died. So it was a real blessing that he got sick, that a teacher saw him, a miracle. And they shipped him off immediately to Seattle Children's Hospital, where he went into ICU for 31 days to stabilize. And when he went in, they said 5% chance of coming out. But he did. And then he came home, and they put him on chemo for his first round of chemo and said, we're going to see if we can get you a liver. And signed him up for a liver transplant. And after a couple months, he went down to California and stayed there a couple months waiting for the liver. And the liver came, and he got a liver transplant. And he was at the Ronald McDonald House recovering 2 more months. And I got a call from the manager that said, come down and get your son. Your wife is not here anymore. And so I drove down immediately and just nonstop and got down to San Francisco and got into the Ronald McDonald House. And the manager said, we were about to call CPS because his mom hasn't been here for a couple days now. So he was there by himself recovering from a liver transplant, and Mom had just skied out, completely lost it. And my son told me this horrific story about a couple of weeks earlier, he'd woken up in the middle of the night because she had been leaving at night and going out. And he screamed at the top of his lungs to see if anybody would come, and nobody came, and he went back to sleep.
Oh man.
Isn't that just amazing? Anyway, he came home. The cancer came back in his lungs, so they cut him open and took tumors out, and then it came into his brain, and they cut out the tumors, and then back to his lungs, they cut out the tumors, and then back to his brain, they cut out the tumors. They gave him radiation, and he went through 18 rounds of chemotherapy, and then they saw tumors in his lungs again, and they said, that's it, we're just not going to harvest tumors anymore. And my son fought for one more operation, and they said, we'll send his brain scans to the 2 leading child clinics in the country. If it comes back clear, we'll do one more. And so it came back clear, and they took out the tumors. They, cut open your breastplate and exposed the lungs and took 5 tumors out of his lungs and closed him back up. And 8 days later, he was back in school.
Wow.
Yeah, he really resilient, just amazing. But about 3 weeks after that, he fell getting off the bus. And he started having paralysis in his leg. And when we took him in to do a scan, he had a tumor about the size of a golf ball in his brain. It had grown that fast.
No.
Yeah, so that was it. And I came, we talked, and he was sad, and he was going to have to go on to the next life. And we kind of had this philosophy, and it was a bummer. He was kind of glad that he got to go and be out of this sick body, and and not have to live with this the rest of his life and what that would mean, because you can just only imagine what kind of
Yeah.
jobs could you get, what could you do with your life with all that medical procedures that you'd gone through. But I remember he just hugged me and says, "Oh, this sucks." And we just had that kind of relationship, and we'd been through it together. And he went on hospice for one day. That he started getting worse and worse and worse, and the nurses were like trying to shift out to deal with him. And finally I called the hospital and said, "Come get him and take him back to the hospital." So I'm in the back of the ambulance with him, and we're pulling up, and just when we stop at the back of Madigan, he hadn't said a word for 24 hours. And he goes, "Oh." And we all looked at him on the gurney. "Now I understand it all." And that's the last thing he ever said. It's just amazing. And that was 24 years ago that he passed away on Saturday, this last Saturday. I met my soon-to-be future wife while he was recovering, and obviously the first one was gone, 2.5 years. We hadn't seen her. And I married her after that. The next year we got married. I met her daughter, and just kept going in the direction of being able to be a therapist and be able to help other people and take that life, the life of being a father and all of the trauma that we've been through, and be able to be empathetic with others and help them through their tragedies, through their situations, through their lives that they're having to deal with. So that's how I got into the therapy stuff, and just absolutely passionate about trying to help other people. I had one of my other lives, right? I had a 30-year career in the Army,
Oh my gosh.
and that's divided into two, really, because I had 10 years enlisted. And then I went to officer candidate school and became an officer, and then did 20 years as an officer. Had 18 countries that I've lived in. I've been to every state in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment. A couple of them I just crossed the border and went back just because
Still
I had
counts.
to
So you
check,
go.
like Delaware and everything. Check, I've been through here. But it's just been amazing, and I'd say right now I'm about as content and satisfied in terms of physical desires and whatnot as I could ever be. And life is really wonderful now. So I'm at a point in my life where it's more to give back, to teach others, to help others understand. I really want to promote this kind of therapy, because right now there's about 4 of us in the world that do this. 3 people I've taught, and they don't do it very often. So it's kind of like a side gig for them, but for me it's 100% of how I deal with clients. And I know if I died tomorrow, it's gone. So 65 years of life, and the ideas and the philosophies and how this helps people quickly would be gone. I'd share one example of how quick this type of therapy can work. If that's all right.
Yeah.
I met a person, and I'll change some of the circumstances for confidentiality, but he came in and he said, "I have a phobia for driving, fear of driving." I said, "Okay, so tell me about it." He goes, "In 1989, I was in a 2-car accident with 7 people, and I was the only one that lived. And I was driving drunk, and I went to prison for 10 years for manslaughter. And when I got out of prison, I couldn't get behind the wheel of a vehicle and drive again." Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we did 3 sessions. I do 90-minute sessions. We did 3 sessions. And at the end of the 3rd session, he stood in the doorway and looked at me and said, "I've seen dozens of therapists and spent thousands of dollars, and in 3 sessions, you've helped me get over this." It was just being able to reframe his mind, to be able to take control of his own attitudes and emotions, and then to segment into the lives, and that life is over, and he doesn't have to live with that anymore if he doesn't want to. And then teaching him the strategy to be able to move forward into that person that he wants to be, and finding his goal and passion. So that's how powerful that can be. And I just want others to learn that. So I think that's more about what I'm after than seeing a client and helping a client. Is I'm after the people to teach, to do that type of therapy. like the
So that
original guy.
a
who came-
legacy can be.
Yeah, so like
shared,
the
yeah.
original guy who came up with cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And was passionate about promoting that. This is multi-life therapy, and I'm passionate about teaching people how to do that kind of therapy to make it quick and effective and give tools that last a lifetime.
And when I first read the title, I could not figure out what you were talking about from the title. I thought, is this guy, is Michael going to be into, what's that called? Where people think-
Past life, afterlife.
yeah, the past life, afterlife thing. And there's just like, you've lived 1,000 lives type thing. And I'm like, what are we going to find? And then I started reading the book with an open mind. And I was like, oh, no, I totally agree with all this stuff. This is cool. You know, it was like,
You're right.
I was like, oh, no. Yeah, we've all had a lot of segments of our life, right? And we know that they're separated in different phases, you know. And I was thinking about the stories you were talking about. Like my childhood, I think I was like a kid all the way through high school. Like just, you know, like the innocence where you're just like, just playing. You know, I don't think it was until like when I was 17, I spent the summer in Europe on like a missions trip type thing, and we would do like street shows, and like there's people like clowns, and like I would play guitar and sing, and it was like a lot of fun, but for the whole summer. And I think that was like my coming of age myself. So that's where my story shifted. And yeah, before that I had like sports and play, you know, everything was just play. Like I just had to do well enough in school that I would get like, for me, it was like a 3.2 GPA. And the reality is just like you were intelligent enough to do probably close to the 4.0s or whatever, but you didn't apply yourself. That I applied myself just enough to not be in my parents' crosshairs. Because I had a brother that I loved dearly, and he had some learning disabilities growing up. So my parents had so much focus on trying to help him get through school that when like I got A's and B's, they were just like, you know. And I sometimes I wish they challenged me more, because I'm now like 42 and I'm having to teach myself to challenge myself to push past the just being mediocre, because I don't want to be a mediocre person,
Right.
you know. But yeah, there's probably multi-lives in there, but they weren't as distinct as like you were talking about, like from like junior high and then high school and then college. It kind of just like flowed together a little bit more. But there's definitely segments like my first love, like senior year in high school,
There you
where
go.
that was its own story, its own life, you know. And I can look at that like 2 years as being like a shift in my life and its own experience.
Right.
And you know, better to have loved than lost than never have loved again at all. You know, that's definitely true.
Each of the lives
You know?
we lead creates a collection of cellular memory
Yeah.
constructs that then we have to find out whether or not they're affecting us today in a negative way or a positive way,
Yes.
and capitalize on the good ones and decide whether we want the negative ones to impact us or not. Most people don't realize that they have that choice,
Yes.
right? They just think they're gonna have to, because that's just what they have to do.
That's what their life
who
is
I
about.
am.
Yes.
It's who
exactly.
I am. I'm a loser.
I'm shy, I'm introverted,
shy, I'm
I'm
depressed.
yeah.
Yeah, and they wear that label, and then they live that life, and they don't need that life. They can decide to have a different life if they want.
And then they don't feel comfortable either. They're just floating through it and be depressed and complain all the time. And then they don't know that they could just shift it a little bit.
Of course, they have to make the decision to do so.
They have to make the decision. It has to come from them, yes.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you could, I mean, I know this book is here, but I wonder if you could teach the therapy so people can self-therapy a little bit.
Oh,
You know?
Well, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. That's
Yes.
a key phrase. And hypnosis is really a key part of this only because it makes things quicker. When we have our eyes open, every time you turn your head mechanically in your brain, you're re-identifying everything. So I turn over this way and I see her over there, and it's going to make a decision in my head: is this friendly or not? And do I have to have an action or
And
not?
of course, Sadie's friendly. Look how nice.
Exactly.
She's glowing because she just had a baby.
But each time you move your mind around, you're using mental resources, and energy is flowing to memory cells to identify and make those decisions. So usually when you go into hypnosis or a trance state, you close your eyes and you shut off all of that action that's happening external to you. So now you have more mental resources to focus your concentration, right? Usually you want to be in a quieter place. If the dog's barking, can pull you out because you're like, oh, what's going on there? And those little tickles of how it affects your memory, it tickles there. And then you just kind of multiply that factor. So the research says in a trance state, you're 50 to 100 times more concentrated than if you were just to try to do it open eyes and thinking about it. I really want to quit eating so much. I really need to lose some weight. Well, like, don't think about a dog. Every time you're saying that, you're tickling all of those memories that are causing you to want to eat more.
Yeah. You pretty much focus on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And all of the things, like when you thought about the bicycle, all of the things that come up from that, the little side thoughts, and wow, what would be good to eat right now? It's
And then
like,
you go back into like you don't want to eat.
Yes.
I talk to people a lot about, weight management and all that. And what always comes up is like when they focus on that, then they're like, oh, I can't have that. Now I want it. And now one more time. All those thoughts. And then when they had it, it's like, oh, I'm stupid and I'm so dumb.
know.
And why do I do that? And it's me and blah. And go down that road. And it would
So
be
for those people, it's like don't think about a dog, think about a cat. Instead of continuing to remind yourself not to eat, not to eat, not to eat this, not to eat that, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want to think about? So if you can get that vision of the perfect you 5, 10, 20 years from now, you go far enough into the future that you believe it.
Yes.
So I've had people that have said, I have all these problems. So how long into the future do you think it would be before you're all healed, all better? Oh, 6 months. I go, no, I don't think so. Well, you don't think I can do it in 6 months? I said, I don't think you think you can do it in 6 months. He goes, well, maybe not. So how far out? Maybe 5 years. Well, if you're saying maybe 5 years, you're not there yet. What about 10 years? No, you're not there yet. You took a moment to kind of think. What about 20 years? 20 years, yeah, I'll have it in 20 years. All right, let's go to 20 years from now. What's your body look like? What are you feeling like? How are you physically? And you paint that image, that passion. What's your purpose? And you get that out there. So that's a lot of work you guys could be using in your thinking about helping people get far enough into the future to get past that subconscious doubt.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's going back to that statement and going back to the diet, just because I deal with that, I always ask people, can you imagine yourself what you look like when you don't have that weight anymore?
Yeah.
And they look at me like, no, I've always been that way.
Right.
Like, well, then that's the first thing you have to do before you can even start losing it.
Well, now you know to
Take it
follow the
further into
process
And do it
10
that-
years down
yes.
the road.
Take it- And then the second thing is so critically important with the weight management stuff. I really try to get away from looks.
Oh, yeah.
I really try to get into how do you feel.
Yes.
Can you walk up the stairs? Can you take a walk in the woods? Right?
Yes,
We're
that's
kindred spirits on that.
That's exactly what I asked. Yes.
I had a client the other day who's a binge eater. I says, do you want to feel like the perfect person who's the perfect weight, or do you want to feel like you're your best you no matter what your weight?
Yes.
So it's like once you're comfortable with you forgive yourself and you're able to not do the emotional eating and all that sort of stuff like that. So much
Exactly.
better. Yay, absolutely.
I like it.
Great. What's next?
Oh, whatever we want to be. All of our notes and stuff we haven't looked at all.
No.
That's okay.
I think what you guys do is so critically important. And I was honored when you gave me an opportunity to come talk. You can tell I've thought about all this for a really long time, and every time I have a new client, I'm going through pretty much this discussion with them and with myself as an example. So we get an opportunity to share in that first session. For me personally, I'm not looking for a lot of new clients, but if this got anyone who heard this and said, boy, I'd like to come see him, I have a couple of things I share, like when I'm at a table at Ignite You or whatnot. I only charge $60 for a 90-minute session
Wow.
So for master's in psychology, licensed marriage and family therapist, hypnotherapist, that's $40 an hour,
Yeah.
basically, to work. $60 cash or check. I'm a little insurance phobic, meaning that I don't collect any insurances, but because with insurances will come reporting.
It's got double the cost.
But the important thing there
Yeah.
is I'm not like a big Second Amendment guns rights, I own a weapon and I want to shoot, but I know there's a lot of people that do.
Yeah.
And we're one vote away from having a law that says if you've had mental health treatment, you cannot have a weapon.
Yeah.
And that could impact a heck of a lot of people.
From
And
seeing,
so, yeah.
from taking care of themselves.
But more than that, the anti-gun lobbyists see that as a way to really eliminate a lot of weapons in the hands of people. For whatever reason, that's their decision. And if they can do that, though, the government will have the right to your mental health record. So it's not even about gun rights at that point. It's there's a government server that has all of your notes and all of your conditions and your diagnosis out there. How secure would that be? What could that be used against you? So that makes me very insurance phobic, and so I'm willing to take hardly anything in terms of wage.
Yeah.
I mean, $40 an hour is a pretty decent wage. A lot of people would like to have a job at $40 an hour, right? So I don't really care. Most therapy sessions, 120, 155 bucks for an hour for a 50-minute session, but I'm doing a whole 90-minute session for $60. And for a lot of people, copay is more expensive. They have to pay $1,000 out of their pocket before they even get the insurance. So I've had a lot of clients who've called me and said, do you take such and such insurance? And I'll go, no, but I'm only $60 for 90 minutes. And they go, oh, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, because of the nature of teaching someone to do it, when you leave after the first session with me, you can do trance, you can go into your own self-hypnosis and get that state of focus concentration so that you can work inside your mind and help yourself. And you can do place, so you can alter from dog to cat on any kind of emotional change. And you can do that the rest of your life. You have those tools that you can use. Most people, when I see them the second time, they were like, oh, it worked for a few days and then it didn't seem to kind of work so much. It's kind of like a battery charger. How often did you reprogram that to make it stronger again? Oh, I don't know how to do that. Well, let's teach you how to do that. So that's part of the second session, is teaching them how to go into trance to increase the power of the place. Now, definitely the rest of their life, they're able to kind of do that. And then when you give them future self, they're able to, we do a neat little imagination game where they're sitting in the chair and you have them go into the future and be their future self and feel it. And they come out and how is that? And you do the epiphany and all that. And then you say, okay, go back into trance, see your future self now standing in the room with you and talk to yourself. Use your future self as your mentor. And they get this kind of really fun thing where they're just imagining, it's all inside the power of their mind. They're just kind of imagining that they're talking with their future self who's giving them advice and helping them and answering and listening to them. And then they come out of that, and that's really all we have time for in a second session. But now they have that to use the rest of their life. The really strong stuff starts the third session, and that's when we do past life. So they go to that childhood incident that caused them trauma. And we have the present self and future self go back and talk to them right after the trauma and hug them and share, and they have a three-way dialogue, and they help each other understand. And of course, the future self's all got it together, and the present self is encouraging, but the future self's really got the wisdom in the room. And then when they come out of that, it's impossible to remember that past event without remembering that you had your present and future self come back and talk with you. And that's when you've wrapped all of the lives of present, future, and past into an experience in their mind, and now they can do that with all kinds of things, using a lot of hands.
Yeah, I talk with my hands a little bit too.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Totally.
I sign up. I'll be a part of that.
Yeah.
You do any group type classes or couples?
I'm about to do there's a longevity retreat coming up that about 11 of us, and I'm having the honor of being able to work them through a little of this as a group. But you have to have enough time. That's why I do 90-minute sessions. You have to have enough time to get them to see it and understand it. So, as an example, if you guys wouldn't mind, if it's all right with you, put your hands together like that without hitting the microphones, right?
It takes some effort.
So pull your hands apart if you want to. So I was using words like if you want to and if you don't mind, because it's you're making the decision. Go ahead and put your hands back together. Now, in your mind, I want you to think inside your head, I am not going to pull my hands apart, even if he tells me to. Okay? You understand? Right? So pull your hands apart. I know you wanted to. Pull your hands apart. All right, one more time. Pull your hands apart. All right, relax your hands. So I do that with everybody on a first session early to let them know, I can't get in your brain and stop you from thinking. There's no way that a hypnotherapist is able to go in there and stop you from saying, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So when you learn to get suggestions from a hypnotherapist, you're still in your brain going yes or no. I'm going to do this or not do this. This makes sense or it doesn't make sense, because that's you inside there. So I often say, now you're able to hear my voice and the voice inside your head. So I keep reinforcing the power of it. I'll do one more thing. Remember, there's people that do this in a different way. So go ahead and put your hands together like this.
I'm a little, or the church one, remember?
I know, but the people are on the outside. Okay. So put your,
She has no idea what we're talking
there you
about.
go. There you go. Okay, ready? Close your eyes. Now, I just want you to use the power of your imagination. This is how strong your imagination can be. Just imagine that one of those fingers is a negative magnet. You can already decide which one. And one of them is a positive magnet. And you can already imagine that. And a positive and a negative magnet, they really can feel the power and the tingling at the tips of your finger. And you can feel those things as you feel that energy getting. Those are big magnets too. If your fingers touch, go ahead and open your eyes. Yeah, so relax your hands. So I do that. Now, some people take that into a control mechanism where they said, now you can't pull your fingers apart. And I want you to imagine you can't do that. They're glued shut and you can't do it. But that makes it sound like I'm in control of you. And I don't really like that. What I like is that you're able, did you feel a little tingling? You made yourself do that? So that's you making yourself using the power of your imagination to bring your fingers together. So I like that it empowers people. Everything that we do is empowering. I do smoking cessation really effectively and quick, because with smoking, it's either you do or you don't. Right? With eating, that doesn't work so well.
Because we all have to eat. Or you hope people eat, because there's the opposite, right?
I suppose I could try to do that, but that would not be very good, right? But with smoking, it's either you do or you don't. So once you have the other house, which is the smoke-free you, and the way that it feels, and you projected a year into the future, and you've been a year since you smoked and like that. I had one gentleman, he smoked for 50 years, and he quit in the first session with no withdrawal. And he calls me 2 weeks later, because this guy is like 68 years old. He started when he was like 18. He smoked for 50 years. And he says, I need to see you again. I go, okay, no problem. And he saw me, and he said he smoked 2 cigarettes in the last 2 weeks, and both times he didn't even realize he was smoking. He was halfway through a cigarette when he went, oh, hey, and he put it out. So there are people that try to do like negative reinforcement with smoking and make it smell bad or taste awful or all that. And that's just so unethical to me, because a lot of times people just keep smoking, but they really don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And yet they're still smoking.
Yeah.
So it's the ethics of it. And then working inside someone's mind. Can you imagine a weekend trained hypnotherapist getting in there going, oh, and do you remember when your father crept into your room and molested you? That's a true case that caused, in the state of Washington, testimony from someone who's been to a hypnotherapist to not be admissible in court. As there was a woman doctor many years ago and had a vendetta that believed every female client that she had been sexually molested. And she would lead the client in the way that she asked the questions. It's like, go to sleep. Okay, now imagine you're laying in your bed and the door opens and your father comes in. And she was planting these memories of that tragic travesty. And she went to prison for it, for what she did to people.
The therapist did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they created state laws around it because it was possible to do that. So you got to go to somebody that you believe their heart and you believe their integrity and they have the training.
Yeah.
You just don't want to go to some fly-by-night and let them inside your mind to be messing around. when you're in a focused state of concentration, you're susceptible. You still have your own thoughts, but maybe they can spin a weave or give you some tale that you start to then believe in. And that would just not be cool. I'm very ethical, very moral, have a lot of experiences in my past. I really believe and passionate about being able to help people quickly, economically, and just give them the tools that they can use for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
That's
And
kinda
you
where
really
I'm
want
at.
to teach other people to be able to do the same.
Absolutely,
Right.
mostly. So that's why I'm almost done with my doctorate. I'm in the process of collecting data. So from an almost high school dropout to now about having my doctorate in education and organizational leadership, I'm just collecting the data now. Once that's done, I'll probably by December be Dr. Brulette. That's going to go on the title, and I'll add a couple of chapters, and then this will be the basis of being able to do that. There's people in our group that deal with Facebook and LinkedIn marketing, and I'd encourage anybody to hook up with those people, because being able to know how to use social media to market yourself is absolutely critical. I started 5 years ago collecting hypnotherapists on LinkedIn, and I have over 4,500 internationally. So
Nice.
I, in all different languages in all different countries, hypnotherapists now, and every single day I'm getting 5 to 10 invites from
Wow.
hypnotherapists, because when you Google hypnotherapists, when you LinkedIn hypnotherapists, I'm one of the first ones that'll pop up because of the size of my network. So now it's kind of happening, snowball effect, it's kind of happening automatically. And that's got me a couple of invites to Australia and England to talk at hypnotherapy conferences.
Nice.
But I'm not going to go until it's doctor. And then
Because it
maybe
gives a little bit extra credibility.
Absolutely.
And what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. In the world of psychology, where everybody's a doctor this, doctor that, when you're not a doctor this or that, you're a Mr. that.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, whatever. So that's
Even when
important.
you might know more than the other
Right,
guy.
yeah, and that's so true in life, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many people think because they don't have initials after their name that they're not important. It's like, this is
You
not
are.
true.
You know
It's
you are.
just not true, right? Well, we know ourselves. You guys are awesome. You guys
So
are,
we would
open your
love
hearts and
we would love to be able to help you in any way we can to get to that point where you're hitting a larger target of people, so that they can take this method of therapy, the hypnotherapy with the multi-life, and be able to help more people. And I'm not sure what that is, but if someone who watches our podcast, whether it be on the Facebook Live or 2 years from now, it doesn't really matter. If you message us or Dr. Michael Brulette, soon to be, right? But in 2 years from now, it will be Dr. Michael
It
Brulette. So
will be,
just
yeah.
message him and be like, hey, I got an idea, or I'd like you to speak at this conference or whatever, because that's how you reach more people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And business is obviously important to make money, but the more people you reach and the more people you serve, the better financially you'll be as well. So it's a wonderful circle
Yeah.
that we could spend our lives serving people and still take care of our family and our needs, financially and what have you. And so I want to help you and encourage you in any way that I can. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. Otherwise, I'd tell you. I'd be like, I got a great idea. I'll tell you if I have a great idea.
I expect that, and I'm welcoming that. It's the reason why I decided to do this, is because I know you guys could help in that in the future. I wanted to answer one question on your list before we're done, because we're
Okay.
almost out of time.
Yes.
Yes.
And it was, this can segment out the people, because the way the world is, between some people that would like me and some that wouldn't. But it's so a passionate purpose of mine, and that was, what's the best book to read? And,
Yeah.
and I got to say, hands down, it's the Bible. I read the Bible absolutely every day.
Nice.
And I have read cover to cover the Bible from Genesis to Revelation 6 times. And I read it every day. And now I'm going through the New Testament on the 7th reading. And so for well over 20 years, I've never missed a day without reading the Bible. And I encourage everybody to do that, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, because the wisdom that's there has stood the test of time for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
And I just think it's great. Well, at least 2,000 years. But, but I just think it's a real blessing, and it's so intricate in its wisdom. It's just something that I encourage everybody to pick up and just start a daily habit of doing.
I agree with you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We really
Yeah.
appreciate that. I'm a Christian as well, and it's really important to me. We both have faith, and I think it's super essential part of my life, and I'm not afraid to talk about it here, because what is there to be afraid of? I mean, it's
I
just,
know.
this is who I am, and it's essential to me and to you, and I love that. So we really appreciate that you shared that with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any
That's
last
awesome.
words you'd like to share before we
That
sign
was
off?
it. Thank you guys.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much.
Oh, you're awesome, Michael.
What's the best way that someone can reach you? Like
Yes.
email, Facebook? What do
Do
you
it
like?
with hypnosis.com. Do it with hypnosis.com. Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right.
So look Michael up, and then thank you for joining us on Purposeful with Life, or Purposeful in Life. Well, both
Both.
are important. Yeah.
Yes.
We really appreciate you joining us. And if you listen to this whole thing, just leave a message to us on any questions you have or any ideas of things that you'd like us to cover or guests that you think would be good to bring on. Because when we started the show, it was like topical. And then we realized we like just talking to people better
Yes.
because we want other people will resonate with the guests, because every guest has their own individual experience and stories, their
own lives.
their origin story, and we all have pieces of ourselves that will resonate with somebody, and that's where it's like really neat. There's people that we interviewed 2 months ago that I have people come to me all the time are like, oh, what your guest said I just listened to, and it it really made a difference in my life, and how do I get in touch with them or whatever. So that's going to happen for years to come, which means we've done what we need to do from being here, and that's why we're here, is to serve people. So
Thank you.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joanne, thank you guys very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.